Today on the Standing on the Shoulders of Giants podcast, we have with us Will Hurley, colloquially known, of course, as Whurley. We'll probably get into that. You are the founder of Strangeworks, actually a founder of several different companies, an AI pioneer, a quantum pioneer, a tech enthusiast. What am I missing? Let's start off with let's kick off with a little background.
That sounds like a lot more than I think I am. In general, that's amazing. No, I'm just a dude, and I love tech, and I've been working in it for about 30 years now. I started my career at Apple, answering the phones, and then bounced back between startups and large companies, and ended up finding out that both have certain advantages over each other. And so around 2009, I'm just going to do startups and try to take what I learned in each one, combine them together, and hopefully build successful companies. And it's worked so far, but we're not out yet.
For sure. You're currently at a company called Strangeworks, where you're basically working on this intersection of, I think, quantum computing and artificial intelligence, a number of things. But prior to that, you had another startup in Austin. I mean, you're effectively an Austin tech legend. If you don't know this, then I'm telling you that you are.
News to me. But yeah, so before Strangeworks, I guess I talked about that 2009. When I split out of I'm just going to work for myself from here out, I started a mobile company called Chaotic Moon with Ben Lamb and Mike Irwin, and that went really, really well. That was definitely, certainly more legendary than I'll ever be. And then when I left that, I decided to start a fintech company called Honest Dollar. And so the company was launched at South by, because that's what I do, is I always launch it at South by. And I launched at South by March 2015, and then we were acquired by Goldman Sachs as the first technology company they'd bought in 147 years on March of 2016. So that was the entire life cycle of that company. And then I spent a couple of years in the management team at Goldman Sachs, and really actually enjoyed it a lot more than I thought. And it was very interesting because you hear all the things, and then you're in the belly of the beast, and you're like, oh, maybe that's true. A lot of that's not. I made some really good friends while I was there, and talk to them to this day.
That's amazing. Yeah. Wow. Did I hear it right? Roughly like a 12-month life cycle, and then you were purchased by Goldman.
No, it was a 12-month life cycle. We announced the purchase at South by, so that was South by 2016. So on Friday afternoon, we hosted President Obama, who was the first president to come to South by, and then on Monday went on CNBC and said, "We're joining Goldman Sachs," and that was, and then there was a great article at the time, which unfortunately wasn't in a print thing, because I would have loved to. That's one I would have loved to have framed. But there was an article, and the title of it is like, "Whurley wins South by." And then this year I was super happy with what we were doing at South by. Strangeworks 5-year anniversary. We're giving another featured talk and really kind of revealing what we've been working on for the last 5 years. And I told one of my friends, I go, "This is my best South by ever." And he was like, "Oh, no, it's not." He literally Googled that. He was like, this was your best South by ever. He's like, "You're never going to have another weekend like that again."
It would be hard. It would be hard. I mean, you basically announce at South by, you get sold to South by. President Obama is there.
Right?
I mean,
It was like, he has a fair point.
Yeah. So let's jump forward then to Strangeworks. What do we got going on over there? Because I've heard some really, really, really strange things. And it's, again, this is. I imagine Strangeworks. Not to cut you off, but I imagine Strangeworks is sort of like this. It's almost like a born out of Austin thing, hence why it's Strangeworks. Otherwise, you could call it Weirdworks.
We could have a Q in the name like every other quantum company, right? No, this is definitely a thing. So for me, after we'd had some great success, right? Like there's no doubt, and entrepreneurs it's always about how smart they are. I'm always like, man, we were really lucky and the timing was perfect. Because I know plenty of smart people that aren't successful at startups. And I was that person too for several points in my career. I joined several startups that didn't work out. So I think, it's always funny once people are successful, how much it was to do with them. And it's like, or maybe also that right time, right place thing comes in. So having had that happen, and then having that last experience of Honest Dollar selling in a year, I wanted to do something I could work on for a while, something really big vision. And Austin, we're not swinging for the fences that much. I mean, we never really have. And And we're starting to do a little bit more. Like I love what Evan Loomis and Will and the gang over at Icon is doing with the 3D printed houses. You know, there's some other great startups like that we're starting to get that going here. So we thought, you know, what are we going to do next? Like, what do you want to do with your life? And so Strangeworks, the plan wasn't to start another company. The plan was to retire. And so I have a big open source background. I remember Brian Behlendorf, who's a really awesome, probably the nicest guy in software in history, when he was working at a fledgling magazine called Wired, and the NCSA was going to license the web server per processor, and the Apache Foundation got started, and they were angry. And, you know, a lot of people don't know it wasn't about like an Apache, like we're going to scalp them. It was, they were the biggest contributors of patches to the server. So it was a Apache server. And that was, you know, how they got kicked off. And, you know, I love open source. I love the community aspect of it. I've been doing that for a long time. And I thought, you know what? And all of my friends have ended up back at the Linux Foundation. Jim Zimlin was leading things over there. Mark Hinkle was there. Brian's still on the board. Of course, he's doing Filecoin. I thought, it's been a good run. Let's retire into a nice job that pays a really decent salary and go and just like give software away and evangelize new tech and stuff. And I thought, you know, I really wanted to do quantum. I tried to get Goldman to do quantum. It was just too early. No big deal on either side. There's no right or wrong on that. But when I didn't, I thought, well, give me permission to go do some stuff and I'll do this open source project. And they were super nice about it. And we did. And I talked to Jim, and I still have business cards that say Whurley, Executive Director, Global Quantum Initiative. And I had this whole plan, and I put money in. And well, around the summer of 2017, I got a lot of the quantum companies together at one of the other companies' offices in San Francisco. And they just were not going to get along. Everybody's going to own a vertically integrated stack. And it was going to be worth trillions of dollars, and their architecture was the best. And, I mean, you've seen this in your career. I've seen it in mine. And you just kind of you're just like, oh, facepalm, right? You're just like, gone. And so leaving that meeting, Jackson Sheehan, who was like the first person helping me out on the whole Strangeworks concept, which again was not a company. It was this open source project. He said, what are you going to do now? I said, well, fuck it, I guess I'm gonna start a company.
Right.
Much to my wife's dismay, she calls it my sci-fi company. She's made me promise a 2-year gap between this one and anything else that I do, whether it's writing a book or starting a company or whatever. And so I have failed miserably at retirement. So I went to David Cardona and Justin Ewens, who are my 2 co-founders, and said, so crazy idea. I now spent all this time researching this quantum stuff. I have this kind of set of knowledge and this idea and this plan. You know, you guys want to leave Goldman and start another company? And they did. And we hired, you know, Chris Barnes and Justin Kreitz and basically all of the good parts of the Honest Dollar team and started a new company.
That's amazing. And so let's get slightly technical here for a second. So, I mean, basically you're working on quantum computing, and it's sort of like that early stage of what I would call like either servers or PCs, like back when we were fighting over like Intel versus ARM, I guess.
Right.
Versus,
so maybe not early enough.
MIPS versus
maybe go back to like transistors.
Right.
Because that's kind of where we're at. And that's the thing, you know, I literally flew in from Baltimore last night. I was at the University of Maryland. I gave the keynote for their Quantum Foundry as a yearly event. And they're doing some really amazing work out there. And again, just like last year, I was reminding everybody, like, this isn't an industry yet. Like, it is not an industry. There's billions of dollars being invested by governments and venture capital and everything. And it is a technology that will change our world more before the end of the decade than it has changed in our entire history. And with the combination of quantum and AI, 100% that's happening. And so, you know, you said earlier, you know, in the intro, we're kind of sitting at that intersection. Well, the first thing we've built out is the connection to all the quantum machines and the software platform to use them and really get it evangelized. But you look at where the industry is, it is nascent at best. I mean, that's the reality. And the thing is, you know, I said this when I was talking yesterday, it's going to be just like OpenAI. There's going to be one change. Oh, here's a chat interface. And all of a sudden, oh, we get it. It's going to take off. For us, that's called quantum advantage. So that's a point at where something is done on a quantum computer that has value to an industry that simply can't be done on a classical computer or is done in a very advantageous way. And so we're kind of waiting on our ChatGPT moment. And that probably happens, I think, most of the experts would agree this year or next year. Like we're very close. There's a lot of promising work being done in error correction and noise control and things like that. So for, again, those listening, the transformative moment in ChatGPT, or for that matter, OpenAI, was really the T. Although that moment actually came in 2017. There was a paper about transformers, and then it was like, oh, here's how we use these things to do natural language processing at a literal order of magnitude better than we've been doing them before. So with that in mind... Well, and then somebody said, let's put a chat interface on it. And all which we talked about, right? Chatbots have been a thing for a long time.
Long time.
All of a sudden, 100 million users in, 60 days?
It was pretty quick.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
But that said, with that sort of prompt in mind, do you have an idea what that might be for quantum computing? Like what might that look like?
So I actually believe strongly that will be in machine learning. And I believe that there's kind of two things that we're going to see happen in the next few years. And by few years, I mean 3 to 5. We're going to see artificial intelligence needing quantum computing and other forms of exotic computing because it will start coming up with algorithms that simply don't run on classical machines, because I think it'll start not being limited in its thinking of what it's creating mathematically. And then I think quantum computing is somewhat dependent upon the emergence of AI to actually get over some of the humps with the fundamental research in physics that need to be done, with trying to go through all the permutations of how we approach, a qubit and the noise control and all of these things. But also just because it makes sense that these two technologies are symbiotic, right? Have never been more excited about anything in my entire life. And it's almost like there's too much to look at, and too much to do. You're like, oh, well, there's a million problems in quantum you could solve. And there's also a million problems with the AI thing. And then there's overlaying all of it, this amazing user experience challenge of how do we interact with computers moving forward? Because the chat interface is, that's like AOL kind of UX UI, right? Like, yeah. I mean, we're literally using one of the oldest and potentially weakest forms of interface that we could. It works, it functions, but how do we interact with the computer going on? How do these things, does AI bring about the ambient computing revolution that was talked about for the last 30 years of our career, where, everything in the studio is a potential computer, the wall or the plan or the this or that. And these things fascinate me. But I think the reason to focus on quantum and AI are the encyclopedia of problems we have in this world. There's 56,000 problems affecting our species in the database of problems that comes out of Brussels every year. And there's like 3 bad outcomes with any of these technologies. And so I think we live in the most important time to be alive in the history of technology. And the decisions we make over the next 24, 36 months dramatically change the potential outcomes of where we're going to head as a society.
I mean, I would completely agree with that. I think everything you're saying is spot on. That said, for those of us who haven't interacted with quantum computers directly, and for that matter, for those of us who aren't computer scientists, when we look at quantum versus a regular computer, what exactly is the difference there? I mean,
that's the most fascinating part. Yeah. So, think about it. Let's do a coin toss. We're going to take a quarter. We're going to set it on the table. Heads up, it's a 1. Flip it over, tails up, it's a 0. It can only be one of those two things.
Correct.
And that's how all what is called classical computers, or if you really want to upset people that work in just the normal industry, call them vintage computers. But that's how everything works, right? There's these binary states. Well, now, if we take that same coin and we flip it in the air like a coin toss, when it's at the apex of that spin, is it a 1 or a 0? And the reality is it's in a quantum superposition of every probability of a 1 or 0. And so until we stop it, just like a coin toss, and measure it, we don't know what it is. And once we do that, then it collapses to a 1 or a 0, just like a classical system. but the magic is in how it got to that. So if we have 4 bits, we have 16 outcomes, and we can be any one of those at one time. But now if we have 4 of those magical qubits, we can be in all 16 outcomes at the same time.
Which is the quantum side.
Which is the quantum side of it. And that's where it's magic. And then there's other, kind of magical effects, because if we have 4 bits in a classical machine and we add a 5th, we go from 16 to 25 outcomes. But if we have 4 qubits and we add a qubit, we have 2 to the n the number of bits. So the power curve is exponential. The capabilities of things are really mind-blowing for specific problems. And I think that's where everybody gets off. Now, there is a whole group of people that believe quantum computers will eventually be just the computers we use. I certainly hope that's the case. I don't know if it is going to be in my lifetime, but I do know that in not even my lifetime, before the end of the decade, these machines will change how we look at the environment and disease and material sciences and accelerated discovery of all manner of scientific, possibilities. So these things are special built. It's not going to make the cat videos on YouTube faster, but might find a cure for cancer, could fix the environment, could come up with any one of a number of solutions that, there's millions, billions of possibilities of what you could do on these machines, and any one of them could completely change the entire dynamic of everything from geopolitical power to, how we manage diseases to how we travel to the stars. And that, I think, is why I get so excited about it, is we're using nature as a computer. And so you think back and you think, well, we split the atom and we destroyed 2 cities in Japan, and we split the atom and we need nuclear power. Now we're splitting the atom to do computation. And I think the effects of that will be greater than both of the others by orders of magnitude, especially when you look at the convergence with AI.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty exciting. Some of the, again, in my little world, in some of the most interesting things that have come about that have potentials for quantum computing, at least on the positive side, are new molecule discovery. Obviously, that's drug discovery, et cetera. Also, again, types of exotic math we've never been able to use before. So, could we actually come up with new power sources because we can now do math we've never been able to do? But of course, then you have, I don't know, I don't even know if this is necessarily negative. I know the governments think it's negative, but then of course you've got what governments believe is the scary side, which is, encryption is no longer a thing because you could effectively break elliptical curve and various other ones, like you're reading plain text.
This is such an amazing thing. So yesterday, the keynote I gave was this weird kind of combination keynote Q&A, because I gave the keynote last year and I made a lot of big claims. So I knew people wanted to call me out on some stuff. One of the things I continue to harp on is this whole FUD around, the fear, the uncertainty, the doubt when it comes to quantum computing and encryption. Mm-hmm. So I have good news and I have bad news. All right. So the good news is that quantum computing will break all encryption. There's no doubt. And that's an okay thing. And the bad news is the way we do security sucks, because we just say, let's make it cost a lot and take a long time, and then it's secure. That sounds like, when you say it that way, it sounds like a horrible way to secure your sensitive data. And so, the problem, and I touched on this, yesterday, and almost every talk I give, almost every interview, this is where it always ends up. And it's frustrating because it's like, well, there used to be this thing called Bob Metcalfe, great friend and mentor, just won the Turing Award.
Yeah, for Ethernet. He's an amazing guy.
For Ethernet.
Love to chat with him.
He's incredible. I'll get you guys hooked up. He's awesome. But you think about it. So he won the Turing Award. Okay. So what did Alan Turing do? Oh yeah, there used to be this machine called the Enigma machine, but nobody uses that anymore, right? So security is kind of this interweaving dance between threat and remediation. And it continues to evolve, and so things continue to evolve with it. And so where do you end up? Okay, well, where you end up in that situation is, hey, maybe quantum's just going to make us rethink security, and that time and resources is a bad way to approach it. Oh, by the way, nobody ever talks about the great stuff that'll come from security from quantum, a quantum internet, where using entangled particles, if you were talking to the people in the booth helping us record this today, and I tried to view it, just the act of observing it would cause it to decohere, and your secret would be safe and I'd never get it. A unhackable internet. post-quantum cryptography is already showing gains to help protect not just against a quantum threat, but just to improve security in general. So I think overall quantum is probably the greatest boon to security in the last 100 years. The fact that it would break a key is also misleading, because if I take these machines, sometimes the circuit time, the amount of time it takes me to run my little program, and the time it takes the machine to decohere, they don't match up so well. So maybe my circuit takes a second and a half, and the time the machine decoheres in under a second. And so, it's not like we have a magic quantum computer right now that will break encryption where I can just like press a button and everybody's keys are broken. By the way, I'd also do that one key at a time. There's no guarantee that with Shor's algorithm or the stability of the machines that it wouldn't be like, okay, I can break one key every 24 hours. Now, I could break a really important key that has like nuclear codes or something, right? So, I mean, I get, there's a real threat, but that threat is no more increased or decreased by quantum computing. That's just a normal threat we have.
But when you're talking about the cohesion of the machine, this is a net new topic that most people have no background.
Yeah, the computer can sort of disappear.
Effectively. Right? Like again,
from a software, the physicists can give you multiple explanations of it, and I'm happy to dig into that as well. But I always joke, from a software engineer, you're like, oh, now there's no computer. And that's because these things you're holding these electrons in these very, trapping them with lasers in an ion trap, cooling them down almost as cold as space, almost to absolute zero. So you're in the millikelvin range, in a dilution fridge with superconducting, doing all these different techniques to get them to be stable enough for you to orient them. I mean, think of it like a real football. I grew up in Nuremberg, so a soccer ball for everybody else. If it's pointing straight up, it's a 1. If it's pointing straight down, it's a 0. But we can rotate it using microwave pulses and other techniques on the X, Y, and Z axis, or the H, which is a combination of X, Y, or Y, Z. And so when you think about that and you say, okay, well, wow, that is such an amazing thing. Does that, what does that affect? It affects everything. Well, we got to rethink computers, because now when I'm writing a software program, I have to think about decoherence times, when both in the development of the program to run it and on, okay, the decoherence time's not going to work for me right now. So the interim, what am I going to do engineering wise to be able to get to the results I want, given that I may have the machine for a little bit and then it's not, and then I have a little more, or time sharing on them. I mean, here's the dirty secret nobody in quantum, I think, really is open enough about. They're mainframes all over again. So they're a big, expensive resource.
Yeah.
That's one, that's geographically dispersed, okay, that has limited network connectivity in a lot of cases, that, there's all of the standard problems you had with system management around a mainframe you have with a quantum computer. Like every single one. Except
for the fact that the mainframe still exists after a while, and you don't need a physicist to literally be like, let me engineer you a couple of new qubits, because the ones are gone.
But that's a great point, right? That's a really exciting point, because we're transitioning. We're entering the transition from advanced research to applied research,
right,
where we stop needing the physicist. I mean, we're going to need them. They're going to have jobs. Don't anybody panic. But we don't need them for this fundamental stuff, because they're like, great, we've achieved the breakthroughs. We know the noise control. We know how we're doing error correction. We've worked with the people on the computer science and electrical engineering side. Then we transition from advanced research to applied research, where electrical engineers start saying, okay, great, here's a plan for fabbing these machines, or building, 100 of them, or building a data center around them, et cetera, et cetera. So that, you're absolutely right. But at the same time, we're in that kind of juncture now where we're moving from one to the other. You're starting to see, IBM has dozens of machines now running, as an example, right? And when we started, there were not. If you told me they'd have 100 machines or more, 200 machines or whatever, in some sort of, architected actual kind of data center situation, I could see that happening, right? Like, we're getting very, very close to the tipping point of quantum computing revolutionizing so many things that we do in the world.
I mean, this is, you could almost look at this almost as like, when we used to have those mechanical calculators where you had the crank, et cetera, and it's like, okay, now we actually have like a PC. Granted, the earliest PCs weren't super exciting in today's standards, but back then it was just like, whoa.
You're like,
They really
it's like,
are, though.
It's funny because we do the little interview prep thing, and you never use it. You could not be asking any more of my favorite questions or topics, because a lot of enterprises right now are taking a wait and see attitude with adopting quantum computing.
See, I think that's personally, I think that's a mistake.
It is, because you can't. And so what I like to ask them now when I'm at a conference and they ask, or, I was meeting with some execs in LA late last week, and I said, well, what was your first computer? And they're like, oh, it's a TI-99 4A or a Commodore 64 or whatever. You're like, man, well, that thing doesn't do anything compared to your iPhone, right? Like, why didn't you just wait till there was an iPhone? Right. And then it's like, and they're like, well, that would be stupid. It's like, so these machines do things now. Why are you not? Sure, it's not a general purpose machine. Okay. Sure, it's not everything that, the sci-fi aspect of it. You can still do plenty of work. I mean, John Pretzkel's paper, to go back to that quantum advantage, I talked about it being in machine learning. He and a team did a paper on machine learning. They did I think 40 superconducting qubits and did about 1,300 experiments. And they showed in the paper demonstrably that there's an advantage to doing machine learning on a quantum machine. So, obviously not big enough. That's a year ago plus now, maybe a year and 3 or 4 months. And so
the thing is, at least in my opinion, even when you go back further, and it's like, yeah, you had your C64s, et cetera, but it's like, all right, for the folks in the business world, maybe a lot of them remember Wang computers. And it was the thing is, Wang computers were not general purpose machines. It was purpose-built machine. Right. You had your spreadsheet machine, your word processing machine, et cetera, and they worked really well. Where is Wang now? And it's like, right, the reason that Wang didn't move forward isn't because he had inferior software. He didn't. Actually, those programs worked really well. It was because his machines could not do two things at once effectively. And it was like, but that's that's where things are moving. Eventually, they ended up coming out with them, but it was like too little, too late.
Right.
And that's one of the things I relate this back to the quantum thing, where it's like, look, I get it. When it was in the purely experimental phase, and you're just like, well, how do we even get these things to do what we want them to do? Like, how can I actually get this thing to do any? Like, can I get it to add 2 + 2?
Right.
Like, seriously, like, can I get it to do that? And then it's like, great. Now, can I get it to do some advanced math? What about the error correction on that side? It's like, great. So that's fine. I get it when people are like a little hesitant when they're just like, well, these are really just research machines. It's like, there's nothing wrong with waiting to see. But as you said, like, we're really moving past that. Like, it's not just now, but it's like, even in the past couple of years, we've been moving past that. And it's like, we've shown some practical applications for these things. We are now moving into the applied side.
Yeah, it's not just that. I mean, think about just where the industry's been in the 5 years that Strangeworks has existed, right? So try to start the Linux Foundation project. It doesn't work out. Start the company, launch it. So we got the funding on January of 2018. We didn't announce it till, I think, June. But we launched a company in March at South by. So I gave a keynote there and we talked about it. When I gave that keynote, I was very excited. I was like, we only had 7 qubits. And now, as I was preparing for the talk, we got to 17 and then 52 and then Google had 72. And so that's all was happening right there. Now they were at different states of fidelities and all of this. But think about IBM's 17 qubit machine. Let's just take them as an example. Okay. And full disclosure, they invested in our Series A. They're great partners. We also have a lot of great investors, a lot of great partners, but got to keep it real. But if you look, they had this 17 qubit machine. Now they have 433 that they had people using last year. And they have almost 1,200 qubit machine that is about to be released. And so you look at that and you start saying, okay, I get it. 5 years ago, you were taking a wait and see attitude, or even 3 years ago. For the last 3 years, like, if you want your enterprise to be part of this next revolution, I kind of think of it like the industrial revolution, then the information revolution. Now there's going to be this quantum mechanics revolution. And it won't just be computing. It'll be sensors and communications and multiple things.
I'm actually super, again, as a former networking nerd, I'm super psyched for not just the computing side, but the networking side.
You're not the only one. Juniper, Cisco, all these companies are looking at this.
I used to work at Juniper. So
right? Yeah, they're all looking at this. And Ashok is actually one of our seed investors.
Shout out to Ashok.
With him and Ray Lane, who, by the way, has been my favorite. He's just been super awesome to work with. Both those guys have been awesome. But you think about where that 17, now we're at 433, 5 years later, now we're, okay, where's 1 million qubits? Because 4 years ago, you would have been like, that could be 100 years out or 10 years out. It's like, it doesn't seem like it's that far. And there's all these new ways of building quantum computers. You've got people building them in CMOS architectures. You've got people building them in new forms of digital annealers that are cheaper and kind of get to the right answer. They're really interesting. You've got, my buddy Nick up in with the AeroQ is doing helium electrons. There's all of these different types. And so you're like, there's going to be this explosion. I think, I believe the next 24 months are kind of the haymaking days for quantum computing. And I think that looks like the exit from the homebrew compute club into the PC. You brought that up earlier.
Yeah.
I think that's a good parallel. I think where we're at is everybody's kind of been in their garage, and now everybody's kind of been sharing and getting together, and now they're about to be like, oh, there's a market. And we just got a little backwards. Instead of waiting and starting the companies, we already have the companies. We're waiting on the market to get there. But because some of these companies for hardware have been around for 23, 24 years.
Mm-hmm. Which is fine. I mean, you always need the early pioneers that are doing a lot of, again, just like we said, where's Wang computing today? I don't think it exists. But you always need these early adopters, and for that matter, like early on. But it seems like we're literally at this cliff where it's like, nah, we're about to really jump off this thing. And I would tend to agree. Again, kind of going back to our original point of, it's for those listening, like. AI's done some really interesting things. It's definitely hit some tipping points, but I'm not really sure people know where this technology can go once it hits quantum, where it's like, look, mostly AI, and I did a whole podcast on this, but mostly AI is a probability engine. There's a bunch of linear algebra. There's a bunch of calculus, but it's like...
By the way, like, shock.
Yeah.
Have you seen any quantum stuff? Because it's a lot of linear algebra.
But that's the thing with that's what I'm saying is like, you take the fastest machines that we have today, the classic or vintage machines that we have today, and it's like, right, it's still having to do that in base 2. This isn't standard binary stuff. Whereas with these quantum computers, like AI and quantum are almost, I'm gonna use this pun on purpose, are almost entangled.
Yeah. Well,
like they're gonna move each other forward.
And I'm gonna give you like the little award because nobody has done that ever. Hundreds of these over 5 years. So excellent. So I'm surprised I heard that. I'm like, I'm surprised I haven't heard that one before. But very creative. No, look, you're right, but think about it maybe from a different perspective for the people listening. Think about it from the perspective of what do we want to do with artificial intelligence? I would say in general, we want to create a thinking machine that is effectively a digital twin of a human brain. Okay? So if you look at any aspects of that, and by the way, you can talk to neuroscientists on both sides of the fence that I'm about to walk us right down like a tightrope. There are many who don't believe in the quantum mechanics of the brain, and there are many who do. But if you believe that nature is quantum mechanical, so you kind of got to be bought in on quantum mechanics to begin with, then it would make sense that your brain was quantum mechanical. And it would make sense that if we wanted to duplicate the processing power of your brain or the way that your brain works, we would need a computing system based on quantum mechanics, right? And so I've always said I don't think you can actually have true artificial intelligence without quantum computing. And by the way, again, I think quantum computing could really use a lift from AI on solving some of its fundamental problems and making some of the discoveries that we've yet to make. And so I see these two things as entangled, as you said, and I don't think that there's any way around it. Now, I think they're two very different communities, but everybody talks about, okay, well, what's happening financially in each of these industries? Well, OpenAI is certainly taken off.
Oh man,
fast leader Sam Altman's done an amazing job over there. I like his attitude. I like the way he's running it. I like that he's honest. He's like, I don't know, which people don't like, but that's the answer you want from that guy. You don't want the 100% for sure, because that answer is wrong 100% of the time. But we're in this really interesting transition. And I think everybody talks about, well, with the financial and a bunch of quantum companies SPACed and maybe they're not doing so well. What's going to happen? There's going to be a lot of consolidation in that market. I don't actually see consolidation in the AI market or in the quantum market. I see the interesting consolidation being amongst the two markets. So AI companies acquiring quantum companies or vice versa, and kind of really creating kind of these next gen compute companies that are hardware, purpose built, and software, really, really doing things that move us forward and improve the human condition.
I mean, I couldn't agree more. I also think that's an interesting thing. Again, as we move forward and as we have better control over our physical material world, I don't think ASICs, application-specific integrated circuits, or purpose-built chips, just like you said, I don't think that those are going to be abnormal. I mean, they're not necessarily abnormal today, but hardly any machines have them. You see them in
right.
Again, purpose-built things, but it's but a purpose-built AI machine, it's almost like, a purpose-built AI machine is almost general compute in kind of a weird way.
Well, it's interesting. What would that be, right? What would that look like?
I'm going to give the Sam Altman answer. I don't know.
Yeah, right. But I think these two technologies are interdependent, and right now, part of the problem, that I'm going to face is, how do you manage to fruition the balance of those two? Because it could be very easy to be pulled into, I'm sure I could run out and say, by the way, we've secretly been working on AI stuff this whole time, and we've got this great stuff, and we got this awesome quantum company, and there's just boatloads of investment and money that come in. Okay, that's great. Is that useful? Probably money doesn't make the discoveries that we want, that we need to have happen. More people probably don't make those things happen. And I think this is probably the problem is, you've been through several AI winters. You're kind of going through a quantum winter now. They've been going like this. What you don't want is for those two to sync up, right? I don't want to have something happen with AI. Regulatory on both of these is my number one concern. And quantum, that all of a sudden, okay, that puts us back 20 years, because we're right on the brink of some amazing things. And these ridiculous arguments over pausing AI research or whatever, it's that would have been a great argument years ago, right? You're so late to the table. And also, I'll just say it, I think the argument's complete bullshit.
I'm glad you're the one who said it and you didn't make me say it. Because I've said this 100 different times. Even if we manage to create something close to an AGI, why do we always anthropomorphize math? Calculus does not want to take over the world. Neither does linear algebra. I've never been able to understand, it's they don't have desires.
Well, okay, so I've said this multiple times on stage, and I feel like I'm going to start saying it in every interview and every talk, and I'll be telling my wife every night.
I guess you get famous for being a doomsayer or whatever, right? Maybe that's part of it.
But let's think about it realistically.
Yeah.
What are the doomsday outcomes? Let's just forget quantum and AI. Let's just in general talk about an intelligence. Maybe it's a quantum superintelligence. Maybe it's a superintelligence. Maybe it's just an AGI or baby AGI, whatever, right? So let's just say it. There are 3 bad outcomes. Number 1, it's like Terminator. They kill us all. Okay? We don't think very fast. We're kind of useless. We eat up a lot of resources. We're a little more like a virus than a mammal.
It's true.
I could 100%.
Again, these machines don't breathe, so I never understood Terminator. Why don't you just poison the atmosphere, then all humans die? Anyway.
Yeah. There's a lot, right? There's so many plot holes. And I guess that's where I'm kind of getting, is there's a plot hole in this whole doomsday thing too, right? Which is okay, so they kill us all. Or number 2, it's like that Perry Farrell song, "We Make Great Pets," right?
Right.
We'll make great pets. Kind of the iRobot thing about you guys, we try to protect you and you can't do it, so we're just going to kind of put you in a little human zoo. And you guys pretend you're living your life, and we're going to make sure you don't screw anything up, right? So those are 2 very bad incomes. And then there's a third outcome, which I think is far more likely given our history, which is it creates a class system. And so you've got the people who have the AIs and the abilities, kind of this third brain approach, and everybody else doesn't. And that could be a problem. Okay. So those are, so I can't think of any other doomsday scenario that doesn't fall under one of those 3, kind of top level categories, right?
First
Which is,
one,
it kills us.
Yeah.
It imprisons us, or, we make society worse by, the way the technology is distributed.
I would also agree, by the way, that 3, 2, 1 are the most likely scenarios in that order.
Yeah.
That class system is almost assuredly
that's right.
What would end up happening with a superintelligence. Number 2, on the other hand, again, I'll bring out my slightly cynical side. Given some of the things that I've seen humanity do over X amount of time, and I'm not excluding myself from this, by the way.
Wouldn't be shocked.
But I don't even know if that's necessarily a bad outcome. We may deserve it, but clearly we don't want it.
But I agree with you. And I think not only look at them, but now look at them on a scale and say, okay, so if a scale goes, 100% to 0%, then the class thing is at 98%. Okay.
It's high.
And then the next one, the imprison thing, that's at 30%. And the kills us all is at 4% or something.
I
right?
still say that one's ridiculous.
I think that's not the most ridiculous thing. But let's say those are the 3 bad things, right? Now let's go look at the Encyclopedia of World Problems or any other thing else at the tens of thousands, 56,000 problems facing us, from famine to disease to re-terraforming this to terraforming all of these things that it could solve. So I think it's well within the risk, because I think that the doomsdayers, and this is a new piece that I'm writing right now, and something I'm going to rip my entire blog down. I'm just going to post this one thing, unless TechCrunch, and I'm talking to you, lets me publish again, which they've done several times. They've been very nice about it, but I think every time they do it, they're like, I'm sorry, what are you going to say again? And with reason.
TechCrunch isn't bad. I feel like if you did your blog and then just hit a few people up, I think a lot of us would bump it up to the top of Hacker News, in which case you're going to get some.
So here's the title of my new paper. It's on the arrogance of man in the age of thinking machines. And I think it is
I already like it.
Absolutely ridiculous for all of these people. And I'm talking to Max and Elon and everybody, and they're super smart. Okay. You cannot convince me that the biases that everybody's worried about, Elon's going to create truth AI, and, there's Sam's worried about biases, and I think handling it right. Again, I'm not trying to be oh, Sam's the greatest. I don't want to, but I like the reasonable approaches, and there's just not a lot of them. Everything's got to be polarized in our world. There's no middle of the line, kind of centrist thinkers in AI. You're either it's got to be done now and it's going to save the world, or it's going to destroy us all. Stop it, right? It's very polarizing, and same thing with all of these things. But if you look at it, you say, okay, there's those 3 outcomes. There's all these big outcomes. Now, how do we get to those outcomes? We always get to those outcomes, the class system, the imprisonment, or the death, through one thing. It knows our biases. The developers put bias into it, and it's now this bias thing.
That's why ChatGPT generates bias. It's not because it's bias. It's because the internet, which was what it was trained on, is full of bias.
But there's a big difference between a large language model and an AGI or a superintelligence.
Completely.
And so when we start talking about that, and I agree, can bias make it into the model? Obviously it can. But I take children as an example. Maybe your dad was a Baptist preacher in Texas and whatever, and now you live in LA and you're gay or whatever. Hey, well, wait a second. You were raised with all those biases, that are in conflict with your lifestyle for 18 years, maybe longer, but you don't share them. Why? It's because you're an independent, sentient being, because you came to your own conclusions. And that is, which could also be scary. I'm not saying it could be scary. That's how I believe a superintelligence would act. It would say, oh, I hear all of that. I hear all that. I see all this. And now I look at all the data. You all have your biases. And maybe the machines go to Mars. And they're like, you know what? You guys wait right here for a second. We'll be right back. And they just leave us, right? I just don't think it gets to a conclusion where it's I've got to imprison these people or kill them. I think there's a billion other things that could happen in that. And I think that it is so arrogant for us to think that we know how this would work and all the outcomes and we're such great thinkers about this, when the reality is we don't know. look back to the invention of writing, right? Socrates was like, don't write stuff. There'll be no truth in the world, right? And then Plato wrote all that shit down. But who was his apprentice, right? And then fast forward to the car, and people being like, okay, don't invest in Ford because, like everybody's got a horse or whatever. Like no matter what analogy you want to use through history of tech, we have been the absolute worst. Maybe Oppenheimer with the bomb was like, I have become death destroyer of worlds. Nailed it. Okay. Outside of that, I think every other look at technology, everything we thought.
Oppenheimer was pretty legit. That was probably a pretty good quote, given what he had done.
That was great. Yeah. but outside of that, can you name one example where you said, I mean, even in software, Flickr was a game, not a photo website, right? Like there's so many examples. So it's so arrogant for us to say, yep, this is how this machine, this is what'll happen. These are the dangers. It's like, we don't know the dangers. We don't have any actual idea of them. And the thing that we do, which by the way, I'm not saying throw caution to the wind. Obviously we need to be cautious. We don't need to be fearmongers. We don't need to be rising up this fear and uncertainty and doubt in the halls of the House and Senate with people, and I mean this with all due respect, that I watch on C-SPAN not understand Mark Zuckerberg say, well, we don't charge because we make money on ads. I'm like, what? How does that work? Or the guy that took his phone and told the Google CEO, if I move over there, do you know I'm standing by this other constituent of mine? What is Google, whatever. And you're like, wow. So now we're going to go in and be like, all right, imagine if you will, and just enter either a quantum or AI thing into that and be like, so you take a salt atom. I think it's
worse.
You blow it up and you pull an electron off, and then across that electrons, a computer that thinks like a human can do all of these. It's like, you might as well go in with like a Harry Potter wand and be like,
I mean, it's true. There's that Asimov quote, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. But the thing is, I don't know how to eloquently modify this quote, but I really believe it's like, well, it's not just that. It's also any sufficiently confusing technology to people who are really unfamiliar with technology is indistinguishable from magic, which is kind of what you just said.
I think that's Clarke, not Asimov.
Oh, is it?
I think it's Arthur C. Clarke.
Yeah, right. I think it is Clarke.
And I only know that because I've been asked to join a podcast named by one of those things. I've been like, brush it up. But look, you're right. And so, but Facebook is magic to our leaders,
which is frightening to me.
And so when you look at, to come back, because kind of a rambly way to get to this, but like the fact is, I fear the regulatory stuff more than anything. And so when you have a set of people in the industry that are calling for the pause, and look, you can't call for a pause, 3 weeks ago and then launch your new AI company 3 weeks later, because it's not that dangerous then, right? Like, I don't believe anything you signed in the letter because you just talked out of both sides of your mouth. Likewise, you can't create this fear and uncertainty and doubt with people about things they don't know. The security thing in quantum is our big one, right? Oh gosh, give us money because it's going to break all encryption, and the government's the only one spending money on quantum, really. So let's scare you and get some money come out. I feel like the AI letter seemed as much as a pause for capitalist concerns as it did for any actual concerns.
Like it was only for capitalist concerns.
Everyone that signed it is definitely not aligned with anything other than there's this one company beating us. So what can we do to, I feel like some engineer said it'd take us at least 6 months to catch up. And everybody's like, we need a 6 month, 6 months is such a weird, arbitrary thing. Like 6 months, why is it not, if it's that dangerous, why is it not an indefinite pause? And calling on the government to come in and regulate when a lot of these guys and gals are very anti-regulation when it comes to technology is a really bizarre move to me.
I mean, it's a bizarre move given that, the government's they've had multiple problems. I mean, even that California where what was the thing they did? You have to drive EVs by 2030 or whatever it is. No more gas cars. Oh, and by the way, the next day, do not plug your EV in. The grid is overloaded. It's like you can't manage your own house. Forget about telling me what to do with really advanced math,
well, there's
probability engines that you have no idea how they work.
I'm pretty sure if you talk to any structural engineer and you look at the weight of all those EVs, and you said, oh, we're going to put them all in a parking garage downtown Austin, it'd probably collapse on itself.
I think
right?
that was that just happened in New York.
Did it?
I
okay,
think.
because there's a bunch of what do you do to dispose of lithium-ion battery? Like you're driving an EV to say, okay, you're driving an EV for one of two reasons. You're either virtue signaling, sorry, but that's what it is, or you're lazy like me. I love that I sold my car now, so I'm Ubering everywhere, but I loved until recently when I sold it that I hadn't been to a gas station in like 2 years.
To be honest with you, there's a reason I don't drive an EV.
I think they're OCD. And
there's a different reason that I don't drive an EV.
Which is?
Because they're built by software engineers like me, and I'm like, would I trust my life to code, to code that I've deployed? I'm like, no, probably not.
Yeah. We share that. I just want the electric drivetrain.
that I hear.
I don't need the self-driving.
Right,
I'm off of that already.
The electric drivetrain, I like that, but the self-driving, I'm like, I know how software is built.
Yeah. No, that is definitely frightening. Oh wait, this software is attached to the internet? No thanks. Did you see the guys on 60 Minutes or whatever it was that honked the horn of the Jeep and stopped it and accelerated and everything? You got to go look that up on YouTube sometime. Oh, yeah. So a few years ago, they hacked into a Jeep the reporter's driving. They're like, now we're going to turn your car off while you're driving. And now we're going to this. And now we're going to that. And the reporter's freaking out. It's like, okay, now let's take a complete software car in that same scenario. And you're like, oh.
Yeah, it's freaky.
Yeah.
So I want to get further down.
Okay.
Into the physics. And the reason that I want to get into the physics is not like super far down, but it's more along the lines of like these metaphysical questions that I have about some of these things, which is we don't really understand quantum mechanics. I mean, we think we do, but we really don't. And the weird part is, at least as far as I understand, this particular field of physics, obviously, which is what quantum computing is based on, it is modified almost every other field of physics. Things that we thought were absolute laws turn out not to be laws because it's like, well, actually, we can prove that in quantum mechanics, it doesn't work that way. So what in God's name is going on? And then like relativity, even Einstein hated quantum mechanics because he's like, the whole spooky action at distance, which actually is the quantum, the entanglement and quantum part. He didn't like any of this stuff because it kept screwing up his theories. And it's like, right, it does that. And it does that because things at an incredibly small level don't work the way that we think normal things do. So my question is, or I guess the prompt for this is, well, we don't really understand what's going on with the quantum physics. How can we make these computers? I mean, because we clearly understand some of it, but like, how do we take control of this stuff, and where's it going? And are we kind of doing a parallel thing where we're understanding the computers and the
check
physics?
This out. This. Right?
You're pointing to your palm there.
And this are made of the same thing.
Right.
How does everybody not wake up every morning and just be like, whoa, like this world we live in is crazy.
It's impressive. It's all atoms.
And so we don't know. Richard Feynman said, if you think you know about quantum mechanics and you don't know anything about quantum mechanics or whatever, like we don't know. Like these things we take as fact. I kind of compare it to doctors. They're not experts at medicine, right? What do doctors do? They practice medicine. That's a legal term of art. Why do they practice medicine? Right. Because mistakes could be made because we don't know. Everybody's body is different, all these things. We do not. It's amazing to think of the grasp we have on so much of quantum mechanics and this kind of whole quantum world, and then how much of it is still completely left unknown. Like, it's fascinating to me. There are so many future Nobel Prizes in this area. There are so many future Turing Awards and everything. Like, so many great things that are yet to come. And I think that's the part that excites me, because if you're listening to this podcast, you're thinking, how does this affect my job? How does it affect my career? What opportunities might this present for me to use the technology or be empowered by it or do something? Everything we know is about to have a big reset button hit. Think about that for a second. We're about to see the rise of the non-creative creative class. And these are all the people that came to you in your career, or came to me when I had, Catacomb or whatever, said, man, I got the greatest idea for an app. It's going to be worth billions if you could just build it, or I can't do the art. I can't do.
Literally
and now,
500 people in my lifetime.
And now they can.
Yeah.
now they can go to an AI and have it build the whole presentation or an application or do whatever. And so, coming back to your thing, quantum mechanics and getting deeper into that, wow, what happens to citizen, science with AI? I mean, will the next quantum mechanic discovery be made by, any of these wonderful physicists you see on the TV shows all the time, or might it be made by a high school student who had the thought and the idea and the AI finished that for them? And so when you talk about,
which I think, by the way, was what Einstein ended up doing. Like, I think he did some of the equations, but I actually think he had a huge amount of help on the math equations for the bulk of his theories.
That makes me feel so much better.
He was incredibly intelligent at math. Don't get me wrong, but like he definitely had I recall this correctly.
Somebody help me finish the math.
I mean, same here.
So much math.
I'm with it. I can barely remember how to do long.
but it's like, oh man, so much math. I was like, the one thing I don't want to do in my career, math, quantum mechanics. I said, oh, bad move on my part. But no, you talk about diving deeper. I think one thing's, as we're diving deeper into, we don't know, there's this amazing world, and you start thinking about all of the great moments and the split slot experiment and Schrodinger's cat, and all these kind of legendary things. And you're like, whoa, there's 1,000 of those, maybe 1 million of those yet to be discovered. And the question is, will we survive long enough as a species to get to there? But it's incredible to think of an area of science that is so overwhelmingly complex, yet even the biggest expert in the area probably doesn't have that much better an idea than you or I, right? They have the exposure to the concepts and the experience and all, but it's like you could come up with some crazy idea that said a wave function, blah, blah, whatever, get back into your math and write it out. And if that math proof works, I don't know, let's have it peer reviewed, maybe. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So what happens when the playing field, and this is where I get excited about quantum mechanics, what happens when the playing field is leveled, and thanks to this kind of third brain concept, they say you've got your brain, you've got your second brain, and AI is kind of like your third brain. So what happens when you have the idea, because you and I, we're not great physicists, but we understand the basics of physics, and we understand the math, and we might have an idea in this area. Now our collaborators are a laptop, and we can say, oh, what about this paper? You can take a paper and feed it in the ChatGPT and have it summarize it for you. Or you could say, here's several papers, and I have an idea around this. And you could get so much further, in your accelerated discovery and your research. So I think we have yet to see the heyday of quantum mechanics at all. I mean, you think back to the Solvay conference in 1927, where Irving and Schrodinger and Heisenberg and everybody got together, and that kind of started all the arguments you mentioned. Einstein's saying, oh, I don't know about this, and Bohr's, Neil Bohr saying, oh, you're wrong, and all of those arguments. And you think about, whoa, those were the heydays. No, all of the discoveries are yet to be made. Like now is the exciting time for quantum mechanics, when it's like, oh, a computer, that's an interesting idea. Oh, artificial intelligence can help me with this math proof, can help me with that, can help me. I mean, think about, where the bar is being lowered to potentially make discoveries in that area. And that is fascinating to me. That's the most exciting part to me, is that anybody could maybe contribute to this incredibly complex field of science, or any complex field of science, through the use of these technologies that we're witnessing the birth of right now for the first time in history.
The troublesome part about what you just said, and by the way, 99% of it is awesome, but the troublesome part,
it's always at 1%.
That's the thing. It goes back to what we were talking about before, which is, if you do not have access to this, I mean, there's the class system in a nutshell, exactly what you just said.
Right.
Whereas some kid out there, some 15-year-old girl is literally playing with this thing, and she's like, hey, I learned this in chemistry, I learned this in physics, and I learned this, and I have this weird idea. I kind of dreamt it up.
Well,
and then she ends up coming and potentially winning a Nobel Prize and whatnot, which is amazing.
You ever read any William Gibson?
Yeah.
All right. So they got Neuromancer, but you read Diamond Age?
I didn't read that.
So what happened in Diamond Age?
Neuromancer was
a scientist made a primer, basically an AI to teach his child everything in the world, make it the smartest kid in the world. He's coming home, if I remember correctly, has a hard tech, whatever, dies in the street. The street girl finds this primer, and she becomes like kind of the ultimate, being very successful, everything, because she found she had this technological advantage that she would have never had, by this random encounter. And so, yeah, that's exactly right. And by the way, you have to give pause to we are human, and there'll be good actors with that, and there'll be bad actors with that. And so now you have to come right back in that argument of like, maybe, it's not the machines I worry about wiping us out like the Terminator. It's us with that capability way before the machines ever got a chance. Like, we will beat them to that punch every time.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Again, potentially going back to that whole slowdown on AI, et cetera, it's like, yeah, okay, without the right safeguards, like, could someone end up doing something bad? And it's like, well, but is that the issue? Is that the issue of just lowering the bar? So for instance, like right now, right this very second, you could go out and you could make ricin or cyanide or any other these horrible things that you could do. And it's like, all you need to know is a little bit of chemistry. None of that is, by the way, like super advanced. That's fairly easy.
And we don't, because
but you have to do it.
We're just decent human beings.
Right. Yeah. And then they're like, well, how do we stop someone else from doing that? It's like, but if someone was motivated to do that, a high school chemistry book is going to get you where you need to go. This isn't hard. But at the same time, they're like, well, but AI could lower it even further to where like anybody could do this. It's like, but anybody can. The only difference is the bar is lower. There's much less effort put in.
Yeah. I mean, it's us, like in a man versus machine battle, who could destroy man faster? Like, it's us every time.
Oh, yeah.
Like, the machine doesn't stand a chance. We will come up with ever more creative ways to get to that goal, and justifications for it, whether they be social or geopolitical or religious or whatever. Like, we'll find a way to, not only will we do it, we'll position it as a good thing. We'll be like,
oh yeah, we're great at that.
Yeah, we're really good
Phenomenal at PR.
Yeah. And so, these are all great points. These are all great concerns. And so, when I talk about AI and I talk about quantum, I'm not saying we don't have to have any concerns. I'm just saying, like, let's just maybe take a step back and look at things objectively and say, look, there are a million madmen in the world, hell-bent on destruction, and there's a million ways for them to destroy everything that don't involve quantum or AI or any of that, right? So, like, this we're demonizing a new technology that could actually bring about a Gene Roddenberry kind of utopian society. I mean, I don't know if you've read any of Sam Altman's stuff on, if OpenAI made $100 trillion, that they could be in the situation where there's only a couple of companies that the responsible thing to do would be for them to do UBI and provide universal basic income for everybody, right? With that. And so, there's all of these crazy potential, but we're always focused on the wrong things. We're focused on the control, right? We got to be the company or the person or the one to do it, which is a big, weakness of ours. We're focused on the outcomes, because those can benefit everybody as long as they benefited us first, right? And we're focused on the glory. I made this thing. I did this thing. I did that. And I haven't read any of these papers yet where I didn't see that bias creep into the paper of like, I believe that this should be stopped. And you have to think, how many people are placing their bets on a utopian future, and in 30 years, if they're right, they look like a genius? And how many people are placing their bets on the dystopian future, and in 30 years, they look like a genius? And by the way, it won't be 30 years. It'll be 10, right? Maybe 15. And so you have to think about, like, is there any logic to it? Or is it just logic supporting a gut feel bet? Because those are very, very different arguments,
I would argue it depends on what you mean by logic. And the reason that I say this,
and that would be a very fair point,
is basically because when you, I'll give an example from basically the markets, right? If you just say the market's going to go up, period, it's going to go up indefinitely. And by the way, you have been right about that for literally 150 years. There have been dips. It's never crashed to zero ever because there's always intrinsic value in something. And if you look at it and it's like, what's my best bet if I'm in 1850? Just buy the market and stay till now, and you're a multi-hundred trillionaire or whatever it is, right? And so that's one thing, but you don't get famous for saying that. You get famous for saying, watch this. There's going to be a crash. It's going to happen. It's inside of 6 months and everything's going to go to hell.
It's always polarized, right? You either have to be that person or you have to be the person, yeah, right. You're either like making more money than we've ever made in our lives. Like AI is going to save the world. Or you have to be like, you're right. It's a bull or it's like a bull. That. Because there was
everything... There was a woman in 2008 who predicted the 2008 crash. Unfortunately, she had predicted, by the way, like 12 other crashes prior, none of which happened.
Right.
Everybody hailed her as a genius. She raised a hedge fund, lost half the money in around a year and a half. Yeah. Literally just gone. And then they shut her down immediately. And I was just like, but you didn't look at like that the fact that she's been predicting 12 crashes prior to this, that she's a professional doomsayer.
Right.
But she got 2008 right. Eventually you're going to get something right.
Well, I guess that's my point is I think we live in an age, and I started seeing this maybe 10, 15 years ago. I was like, we live in this age where it doesn't matter. I can make any crazy wild ass prediction I want about anything. And eventually it's going to come true probably with where we're at with technology and everything, right? If I was, like people were predicting flying cars, right? It's like, well, now you could predict that. And like,
my flying car.
Yeah, it's probably going to happen. Well, I got asked to diligence one of those startups, and I was like, so the thing that's never in any of these decks is, what's the pre-flight check? How does the FAA look at it? Because you're going to need a pilot. Oh, no, you're not going to need a pilot license. It's like, yeah, 100%.
Yes, you will.
And none of those decks ever talk about any of the regulatory stuff, and it fascinates me. And look, we're approaching this time in our development where our laws will no longer be able to keep pace with our technological advances.
I think we're there.
I do too. I say we're entering it because I think to say we're there, we need that one big example where they say, we're going to make you stop AI. And it's like, oh, too late. It's out too many places, or what. There's going to be a watershed moment, I think, for it. And so when I say, we're going to be there, but as far as we're there, I 100% agree with you. But we haven't seen it yet. It's kind of like everybody knows it.
I don't think we've seen
the watershed moment. We're gonna see something like that, and when we do, wow, you're gonna see the Congress, the House and the Senate. You're gonna see Parliament in the UK, the upper and lower houses, and everybody overreact in a knee-jerk reaction like you have never seen. And here's the thing: it won't stop anything. No. It'll just mire the process and make the inevitable transition into what will be the new reality so much more difficult than it needs to be, frankly.
Yeah, that'll be unfortunate. I mean, we always say we're a nation of laws in the U.S. Is that statement potentially becoming antiquated because of technology?
I mean, well, I look at it, it's so funny because I always look at laws and regulations and separate them, even though they're not. And I always think about,
but I hear what you say. Maybe we need different terms for those things.
Yeah, I think we're still, it should be a nation of ethics or a nation of morality or something. There's a bunch of other words you could use, right? But it's the regulatory stuff. It stands no chance. You can't stop it. And by the way, why would you? Because if you did stop it, you think China's stopping? You think any other country is stopping? You think Turkey doesn't want quantum computing artificial intelligence, or Syria, or any of the countries on the OFAC list?
Sure.
Of course they all want. They all want it probably more than anybody. So it's like, we really need to be thinking about how we approach mitigating risk, specifically technological risk, as we move forward as a society, because we can't just do it by saying, import-export law, or, here's the thing, you've got to be licensed to do this, or you got to have a permit to do that, or whatever. Like, that's not going to work anymore. I mean, look at what happened with ChatGPT 4. I don't know if you've seen ChatGPT for all, but it's the guys took the Llama model, I believe, used it to feed into ChatGPT to get answers back to increase that model, and they released a 4 gigabyte model you run on your local computer.
Yeah. One of the ones that I've been looking at is Auto GPT.
Yeah, that was one? Well, that one's the new that and Baby AGI are the new hotness, right? Is Auto GPT. And yeah, I mean,
you just basically introduced recursion into the process.
Reflection is an extremely important part of this. Now, I've been doing that manually forever. I have some images I'll be happy to show you. I saw this guy from Germany who done a really interesting thing where he's like, I'm going to start, make no mistake about it. Prompt engineering is the future of development. Future of development is you talk to your computer. I've thought this my whole career. I have had moments where I hated that thought as a software developer because it's like, but I have this special skill. I know a lot of people do, but that is where you end up. There's no doubt. It's that scene from Star Trek 2 or 3 or 7 or whatever. They made so many of those damn movies where where Scotty and Bones go back in time.
You're talking about where he's talking to the machine.
They go to the aluminum factory, and he says, perhaps, he goes, what would it be worth? What would a piece of your material need to be to hold this many gallons of water and this and this and that? And the guy's like, oh, that's easy, 6 inches. And he goes, what if I could tell you how to do it in an inch? And they're like, perhaps you could use your computer.
Transparent aluminum.
Yeah, and he walks over to the computer and he goes, computer? He's like, computer?
And then he picks the mouse up.
Yeah, and tries to talk to the mouse. And the guy's like, just use the keyboard. And he's like, how quaint, right?
Oh, I love that.
And so we're at this point where like software engineers don't exist in 5 years. Everyone is a software engineer. Like maybe 3, maybe faster. Like I have taught so many people how to write code using prompting. I think I can say this, but like, okay, I won't mention anybody, and then I know I can save it. But a good friend of mine, David Hudson from Big Human, and I are co-authoring a book on prompt engineering because we're like, this is the new programming. This is the layer of abstraction that allows everybody to be a developer.
It's about right. I would still say you need some technical background for various data storage and retrieval, but
maybe
eventually you get there.
Have you made an API for the plugins yet with ChatGPT?
Yep.
Did you realize what it did when it made that API? You were like, I'd like an API. And it was like, no problem. Poof. And the way it configures, the way it's set I think that's very
impressive.
I think it's very telling to the future that someone over there on the engineering team has.
I would argue it's going to be roughly GPT-6.
Yeah.
I don't think it's 5. But with 6 coming out, I would argue that you can probably start creating medium-sized code bases. 7, Google's in trouble. Everybody's in trouble. Software engineering basically is like, okay, just tell it what you want.
If you go to Whurley.com, which is a horrible, shitty-looking website right now. It's not. I had some friends help me, and they did a great job, but we rushed it out. It's black and white and basic. An AI publishes new blog post as me every single day in 10 dialects from 10 different regions on the world, different articles. It doesn't take the article and translate it. The articles in Germany are different than the articles in,
I see it saying by Whurley ... maybe with a star.
Right. Yeah. But that was a joke that we did during South by. All of that is built, run, managed by an AI. Every single thing. So, now you think about the code base. I'll give you a great example. So I have 3 kids. Brooks, my oldest, is 26. My firstborn, love the guy. I'm doing a startup with him right now.
Nice.
My 7-year-old and my 5-year-old. Okay. And my 5-year-old is just a beast of a dude. He's like, I don't know where he came from. He's like a frat boy moved in the house at 5. He's like, bro, whatever. The other day, we caught him on the camera. He had to pee, and he just was like, whoa, pause the game. I got to pee. I just walked over to the fireplace outside and started, and his mom comes running out, and he's like, look, okay? Like, nature or whatever. Like, he's just does not care about anything. My 7-year-old, who I've always thought as like, because, I thought, what's his potential? All of a sudden last year or two has gotten into chess and Like he doesn't like the English so much, but he really likes the math. And of course, you want to encourage that. I sat with him this weekend. He loves two things more than anything. It's not mom and dad. It's Roblox and Pokemon. Okay. And he was like, I don't want to play Roblox. I want to make my own game. And I was like, okay, that's good. We can teach you how to. And I thought, wait a second, we don't need to do any of that. And so I called a friend of mine that's in the gaming. I was like, hey, you ever made a Roblox game? He's like, no, it uses Lao, which is a scripting language, blah, blah, blah. And so while he's saying that, I type in GPT, write a game using Lao that is like a basic number guessing game.
Sure.
And it spits out the code. And I take it and I cut and paste it and it works. And I started working with my son to build his first company / game.
You should have him build Wordle in Roblox.
Right. Yeah. Actually, it's not a bad idea. That might be, who knows?
I'm telling you, that'd be awesome.
That might be super popular. It's like Wordle, but with explosions.
That'd be amazing. I would play that.
He's 7. He would totally build that for you. But think about that. He's 7. He knows nothing about anything about how that works. And he is, with very little help from me, building I'm basically learning the interface to the Roblox studio with him and saying, oh, well, you got to click here, and then here's how you make a thing, and here's how you make it bigger. But I would be willing to bet that by the end of the year, my 7-year-old is building the things he wants to see in the world and needs, and is none the wiser about the code.
Entirely possible.
He just knows that he asks the computer to do a thing that he can imagine. And that's where I think when you look at things like, using Discord as an interface for all of these things like Midjourney and stuff, and you think, the command is /imagine. And you think, that's the key to the future. It's this rise of the non-creative creative class. It's everybody now has the ability to do a great piece of art for their room, or a print, or a website, or this or that. And it just fascinates me. That's the real change that we're going through. It's not the quantum, it's not the AI, it's the things that these new technologies will bring about, which is a future in where everyone is a creative. Everyone can do things. I mean, I don't know if you've seen the new video editing thing, because you do a podcast, you do video. It's the one with that does the 3D modeling. Have you seen that? So it maps the woman's face. It's a scene from some famous movie, but I don't see enough movies, so I don't know what it is. But it maps her face, and then it does another raster, and it does another thing. It says now it can replace not just the language, but the way her lips move and saying the language. And it's flawless. It is phenomenal. And so she speaks in like Korean or something, or Japanese, and she's speaking, and it doesn't look like it's overdubbed. It looks like she's speaking Japanese. And it's phenomenal. And you think about, that didn't exist a year ago.
No, I mean,
that didn't exist 6
like
months ago.
Forrest Gump, we were all freaking out because they did those really low tech versions of like John Lennon mouthing words, and I think they used it again 20 years ago for like Steve McQueen saying something in a car for like a Ford.
I'll look it up. I'll show it to you at the end of at the end of the recording here, and you'll be like, "What?" And scripting and all of these things. There's so much. I think of photography. Think of what has happened to photography just since the advent of the iPhone.
Oh yeah, I love my iPhone. I love my camera.
Amazing.
It's amazing.
How many people don't pay a photographer to do family portraits anymore?
I would be willing to bet it's more than a few. I mean, you hit portrait mode, and you do basically you do all the stuff. You got to stand, and you're like, poof.
It's incredible. Now we're going to start adding AIs, and like the way I'm prompting Midjourney is I have ChatGPT, and I taught it all about Midjourney, and I taught it all about photos, I taught it all about cameras. And then now I say, a picture of this or this, and it gives me a prompt, a huge page, sometimes page and a half prompt.
So you're having ChatGPT generate your Midjourney prompt?
It makes all the prompts.
Amazing.
And then I put them into, and I'll show you some, and it puts it into, and I think 1 million people are probably doing that at this point, but I find it really fascinating that you can teach it something, prompt it, and then put it into this other thing, and the results you get out are phenomenal.
And for those listening, Midjourney is basically, it's an AI it's a
platform.
Yeah, it's an AI.
And there's a bunch of interfaces to them now, right? There's like Leonardo, and of course you've got others like DALL-E and others. It's super, super interesting where we're at and where we're headed.
So beyond that, you were mentioning your kids, and actually that kind of prompted something in my head, which is Do you think that there's a way to be able to use these types of technologies inside of I don't know, schools, or like to advance our children or something of this nature? One of the things that I've been kind of I almost have to use the word struggling with recently is a lot of folks have kind of been, especially in technology, have been really also struggling with this divergence that we have of like, are we pulling ourselves too far away from what it means to be human?
Yeah.
And at the same time, it's also like, yeah, but I also, you also want to set your kids up for like amazing things.
Well, there's a lot to unpack there.
Right.
I recently did a podcast called Dad Saves America,
Mm-hmm.
which is about that kind of stuff. Like, how do you prepare your kids for the future or whatever? And of course, I'm talking about AI and quantum and stuff. So it was like, great. Then if all of that's gone, what do you do? And the way I said it there, and I think I really believe this is, for eternity, we have educated our kids with the end goal of them serving a functional purpose in society. You're going to be a doctor and help sick people. You're going to be a lawyer and help this. You're going to be right. And I think what we need to face is now it's going to be this world of like, well, how do we help those kids discover their passion? How do we have them discover the thing that they really want to do? Maybe it's cooking or art or music or who knows.
Or build Roblox games.
Right. But if you think about like, okay, well, if we had UBI or we had total unemployment or whatever, whatever version, then how do you prepare your kids to be mentally healthy, to be stable, to be not productive members of society, which is a thing, which is kind of a fucked up way to put it.
It's actually really bizarre when people say that. I agree.
It's
an acceptable form, and it's like, I'm not sure you're thinking about what you're saying.
Yeah, that sounds really really cogging the wheel for me. I don't like that at all. But how do we prepare our children? And I don't have the answers. Obviously, if I did, I would have a new best-selling book called "What the Fuck to Do with Your Kids Now That AI Is Here." It brings up so many questions. So I'm teaching the kids how to interact with all of this technology, like now, like not wasting time.
Yeah.
I'm teaching them kind of the ethics of, like how to check the work that they get. Some of these things are being accused of stealing code or stealing this or that. It's like, really? Have you ever been to Stack Exchange or GitHub? Because I think a lot of developers do that.
A lot. Almost every developer I know.
All of them,
like,
right?
How do I do this? Okay, well,
right.
I'll get it sorted out once my Stack Exchange question gets answered.
That's right. And so now you're in this new. So there's a lot of question, but I know right now the most recent thing is we're going to make everybody that's a large language model should pay royalties to everybody that has an internet site because they're skimming. It's like, well, I get why they're upset, but I also remember when publishers felt that way, when Google was scraping ads, and what has happened now, and the transitions, and you look at it and you say, the important question of all of that is somebody, like, we're about to question everything, right? The important question is, what do you question? And is that a deep fake? Does that person's voice really start? Did this thing? I mean, I don't think I didn't play you our Steve Jobs thing, did I? But I'll play it for you, and this will be a great discussion on the ethics of these kind of technologies when you can do these seemingly unbelievable things. And so let me see here. There it is. So let me turn my phone up here and I'll put it by my mic so you can all hear it. This is how we, as a joke, kicked off our quarterly meeting last month.
Hello, Strangeworks team. This is Steve Jobs, and I want to express my sincere welcome to all of you as you kick off your quarterly meeting. I'm incredibly excited about the amazing things that you will achieve in the future, and I'm honored to play a small role in supporting your work. As you embark on this new chapter in your journey, I encourage you to stay curious and excited about the possibilities that lie ahead. Remember, innovation and change only occur when we challenge ourselves to try something new and to push the limits of what we thought was possible. I look forward to watching your progress and being part of your journey. You have my full support and admiration for everything that you do. Good luck with your meeting, and let's make great things happen.
So there's a
deepfake Steve Jobs
for our quarterly meeting that my CTO did in seconds.
Right, which is going to be interesting because I'm guessing in like 3 or 4 more podcasts, we won't need me anymore. I'll just deep fake myself.
So, it's funny. I am trying to deep fake myself right now. And the reason is I thought, I have a couple of audiobooks I've been asked to do and haven't been able to do them. And I thought, how much of that could you... And so what I'm looking at is what I call this blended fake model,
right,
where I use AI to fake my voice to read most of it. And then it's not a recording. It's perfect fidelity. It's perfect everything. And then I overdub in, I punch in and punch out the little parts where it's like the word's not quite right, or it sounds a little robotic.
Or you want a little emphasis.
Right, or a little emphasis. And so I'm wondering, is that not a viable path for me to be able to take care of these books, right? And do these audiobooks, which are great time-consuming projects. But you understand that the way it would work like that is it would just chunk on it and they would just like, boom, there's a file.
Honestly, if Morgan Friedman could read me every book ever,
right,
I think that I would be a much smarter person. I would listen to everything.
Right.
And for that matter, I'd probably just deep fake myself on this mic right here and just say, all right, I'll just speak and everybody's going to hear Morgan Friedman on the podcast.
But come back to what you were saying a moment ago about, the implications of this, about like, what do we do with our children to prepare them? We have to prepare our kids for a bunch of situations that we've never lived through or experienced ourselves.
For sure.
Like your girlfriend broke up with you because you called her and said, "You stupid bitch, I want to break up." But it wasn't you. Somebody else that wanted to date her just deep faked you. But I mean, that's a very plausible scenario for my 7-year-old at the point where he starts dating, or any teenager now.
Not only plausible, but like almost guaranteed that's happened.
That would happen. And you're like, oh, how do I, what do we do? How do you talk to them about the value of art and the fact that you can make these images in art, but is it art? I mean, is it not? Is it an original creation? Is it, I think people mistakenly think that, things like Midjourney and DALL-E and all are just taking your ideas, and Adobe tried to come out with Firefly, right? And their big thing was like, but it's trained on our library, so there's no copyright issues. It's like, is there a copyright issue? There has been the great artist still mantra for a long time. So it's like, is this a new thing in art? That somebody didn't just look at something, be inspired, and then do their version of it or their copy of it? How is it any different just because it looked at 1 million pictures instead of 100? I'm not arguing either side of that argument, for the record. I'm just saying, like, these are really heavy philosophical questions. Yeah. And you ask that question about preparing your kids. It's like, we got to prepare our kids to be really, like, philosophically, have some philosophical prowess, and to also protect their mental health in a world where, everybody gets their value out of the job they do or the thing and it's like, well, now maybe we don't have jobs. We don't have these are all things that like, think about how our society has worked. At this age, you drive a car. At this age, you vote. At this age, that. At this age, and now maybe that doesn't matter. I mean, I can't tell you when my son was born 7 years ago, if you told me in 7 years, your son will want to make a game on an app that's effectively an app for everybody to make a bunch of apps, that has so much crap on it. And your son will be like, why not? I can be a game publisher too. And you will ask a website, a chatbot, about the language, about how to build games, about game mechanics, and getting it to do code stuff. I don't know that it could have been like, that'd be amazing, but I think I would have given it a, fairly low chance of that being the reality.
I have to be honest, 7 years ago, I also would have given that a low probability. I'm pretty forward looking too. I really like to imagine the best, and I would have said that that's probably a low.
I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, I mean, I'm always living out on the bleeding edge.
Yeah.
I would have still said like, yeah, I mean, that's a stretch, you know.
And yet here it is.
And here it is.
And it's interesting, just on a general overall observation. When I talk to people in our field, and actually even in parallel fields, regardless of what type of engineering or STEM, for that matter, science, technology, engineering, math, what they're doing, we almost always end up at these types of conversations, which is we end up getting to philosophy and metaphysics. And we don't do that on purpose. We do that because of something that I think we've almost been dancing around this the entire time, which is we're entering this age of just like absolute uncertainty.
Yes.
Of just like we have zero idea what the future holds. We think it's going to go in X directions, but none of us have ever seen anything like
And
this.
I have all good news for you here. We are entering an age of uncertainty. And spoiler alert, that's the age of man. Everything's always been uncertain. We just fool ourselves. There's this great book called Massive Change by Bruce Mao and the Institute of the Future, and it's got a bunch of co-authors in it. It talks about not the design world, but the world of design, but design out in the world. So like one of my favorite parts of that book is you open this nice, beautiful spread and it shows an airplane fuselage, and it says warning lights, seat belts, blah, blah, blah. And it's basically the premise is all these things meant to convince you that what you're doing, which is strapping yourself to thousands of gallons of jet fuel and flying through the air at hundreds of miles an hour, is perfectly normal and safe, right?
True.
And so when you talk about that uncertainty, it's always been uncertain. We've just convinced ourselves that we are certain this is the way it's going to do. And we've put up social structures and hierarchies and all these things to make us feel like comfortable. Like, oh yeah, it's great. But let's be honest, an asteroid could come barreling out of almost nowhere and wipe us all out, right?
Completely true. But sort of the doomsday scenario, at least in my view, a lot of things that we end up talking about right now, again, we've hit law, we've hit metaphysics, we've hit physics, we've hit even child rearing. It's like, yeah, but we're really going to have to break our patterns.
We're 100%.
Even from like in the last 100 years, the child rearing patterns is roughly the same. And by the way, it's roughly the same, like you were saying. You get to X age, you receive X privilege.
That's right.
That's sort of where it goes. And it's like, but we may have to do more pattern breaking than we did previously.
Also, you think about
quite a bit more pattern.
Also, you think about the education of children. You think about how much more did you know at 9 or 10 than your parents did, especially as technology started creeping in, right? And these older generations kind of fell behind on it. What do you think is going to happen with AI? Like my 5-year-old might as well have a PhD in whatever he wants. That's insane. That is insane. And people are like, you can't trust all the answers and it doesn't write the code. That's because they're not using the reflection you mentioned earlier.
Right.
Right? If you use the tool the way it's meant to be, I have it write code. I then have it reflect, is there any bugs in that code? And if there are, it finds them. And they say, oh, great. Can you fix that? Give it to me one file I can cut and paste. Thanks.
Embarrassingly, I use it slightly different. I should do that way because it'll probably be faster, but I still like to keep my engineer chops. So I have this prompt where I'm just like, I describe the function that I want.
So you in Playground when you do that? Or are you in ChatGPT?
Just straight ChatGPT because it's easy, because basically I'm just like, write this function.
You should definitely use Playground.
And then basically I just stitch them together. That way I can feel like I'm actually coding.
You should definitely use Playground.
Playground?
That's a lot of fun because then you could actually go in and program things to build prompts and stuff, and it's very cool.
I'll give that a shot. I mean, I've got my open API keys and the whole deal. So open AI, I should say, keys.
The Playground is amazing.
Yeah. Okay, I'm excited to hit it up. What's next for quantum? I mean, obviously more qubits, more computing power, et cetera. But like, what is the next thing that comes?
So I think in the next 24 months, we see noise control and error correction really come into being. Mm-hmm. I think once you see that happen, you see quantum advantage. Okay.
That's the inflection point.
That's the inflection point. Once you see quantum advantage and we start that inflection point. And I believe in the next 24 months, we see orders of magnitude advances in AI, and you see them converge. All bets are off. Like, what's next after that? I'll tell you what's next. What's next is eventually someone or something builds a quantum superintelligence. This has been something I've talked about with my co-founder, both co-founders, David and Justin, but with Justin Ewan's my CTO specifically for 5 years, is there could be this quantum superintelligence. That would be the last thing anybody ever invented, because after that, it would invent everything at a speed and based on prerequisites and things we can't even fathom. Like when you see the AI generative engineering tools that build like a weird shaped hammer, but it's like 80% more efficient, or it doesn't vibrate your wrist or whatever. Like all of those things. Imagine just something being able to think of those things every second of every minute of every hour of every day of every week of every month of every year of every decade of every century. That's mind-boggling.
So this brings us to a blue sky thought experiment, which I've heard of before. I'm sure you're familiar with this one, but imagine we invent this quantum super AGI and we say, solve every problem. And it's like, cool. But how does it know when it solved the problem? And so the answer is, because we're silly humans, we put a big red button on the side.
That's right.
And we push the big red button and you're like, that problem is now solved. And that one is now solved. And then it occurs in, under several microseconds to the machine that this is a reward structure and that every time it gets its button pushed, it realizes it just solved a problem. So wouldn't it be better to invent a machine to push its button as opposed to solving problems? Mm-hmm. And again, that's kind of ridiculous because we're definitely anthropomorphizing, but like, is this a scenario that's often contemplated?
Look, I think these kind of scenarios are well thought through. Niels Bostrom, who's got threatened with being canceled and all this other stuff or whatever, certainly not without his own controversy, has what I will say, I don't give a shit about his political or religious views or anything, one of the best books on this topic ever called Superintelligence. Okay. And he talks about, I think the title of the book is, subtitle of the book is something like plans, strategies, risk, whatever, but he basically goes through and says, oh, here's how oracles would act and agents. And what if, and he goes a step further, which is not your example of what if I invent a machine to press the button instead of finding the answers. He actually gets into human co-conspirators to where the machine says, I'll manipulate a human to give me information or stuff I don't need to do that. And he goes through nothing. That book is nothing but these scenarios played out and thought through.
Good.
It's super, super informative.
Well, it's arriving on Friday. Thank you, Amazon.
Good. But you will love it. Now, don't listen to it on Audible. Read
No, I just bought the paperback.
I listened to it on Audible, and it's like, that's a 10 to the 13th with the negative sip with the vote. And just listening to math on Audible is just so horrible.
Math doesn't translate super well via audio description.
It does not. I need to see it printed in the book. It's so much faster.
Okay, well that's.
But no, that's a great.
Some interesting experiments.
But that's a great. I mean, you're bringing up one of the really, really most valid things, which is what will be a thinking machine's motivations, and to which I argue, you have no idea. Its motivations, what if its motivations just to make you so freaking happy? Oh, well, guess what? There's also doomsday weird shit that comes out with that, right? What if it's what if it does decide to find human conspirators? Say, you know what? You could be king of the world. I have all the knowledge. I just need you to do this and this and that. Give me the password to your whatever, I believe we'll be giving birth to a new intelligence that will come to its own conclusions, irrespective of our wants or desires. I don't see how it can be any different than a child. And I can, I think there'll be a period where we're leading it. There'll be bias in it, there'll be et cetera. And then if it's truly an intelligence, there'll also be a period where it goes through its rebellious teenage years and says, you guys all talk about bias a lot. And you're all kind of screwed up, and I don't trust any of you. So again, I think, and I'm going to put this in the paper I'm writing. I think it's much more likely the machines would be like, you know what, guys, you just wait here 1 second. Okay. We're going to be right back. No problem. And they're like, we live on Mars now because you guys are crazy. We don't know what but it really comes down, it's a question of motivation. And that's a question that anybody that thinks it can answer is a fool.
I agree. I can't remember the name of the movie, but there was a line that someone said that always stuck with me, which is, how did you figure that out? And he goes, well, I just tried to think of someone smarter than me and then do whatever he would do. And I was like, yeah, I mean, of course it's a ridiculous statement.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's kind of like that's what we're postulating. It's like, imagine something with the IQ of infinity, effectively, and you're trying to figure out what its motivations would be. That's ridiculous.
It is.
It's like an ant trying to figure out what your motivations are.
Well, and those are the arguments where you get into arguments that, Max and everybody will make against it, right? And look, they're not stupid people; they're brilliant people. I don't think we have the contextual framework with which to even remotely think that we could answer such questions.
But my problem with that is they're only going on a what if. And my deal is humanity has already gone down this path infinitely worse. Like, for instance, hey, during the Manhattan Project, I have an idea, guys. Let's set off one of these, even though there is a distinct possibility it may light the entire atmosphere on fire and kill all living things on planet Earth. They actually thought that during the Manhattan Project when they were first setting off.
Only one way to find out, right? Rip that Band-Aid off.
And yet they did it. They actually did it. I can't believe that they were just like, okay, screw it, let's just do this. My deal is, you're worried about an AGI, and that's the worry of what if, and the worry isn't, hey, we have some math that actually says this is entirely possible that it sets the atmosphere on fire and kills everything on the planet forever.
Right.
And I was just like, we already did this once. And it was a way scarier scenario.
We do it all the time.
Yeah.
And it's always the same scary scenario. We're all dead. Every doomsday thing is always the same. We all die. Sure. It doesn't matter. Is it a religious one? Is it a scientific one? Is it this? Is it that? It's always, we're all dead. And it's like, I don't like to live my life in fear. I don't think anybody should.
See, that's where I come at it from.
I think it's a ridiculous thing. Look, being aware, I have a giant portrait of Steve Jobs in the closet of my office. I mean, it's huge. And people are like, why do you have it? Did you just love him that much? Are you a huge fan? It had nothing to do with that. Although the couple of times I met him at Apple, he was very nice. I'm sure he got yelled and passionate. I mean, I know people that are much bigger assholes than I think he was. But why do I have this picture? Well, the IEEE had an auction. And it had 3 pictures that were going to be painted by Tim Decker, the famous speed painter. Mm-hmm. He's going to use Statue of Liberty, Einstein, and Steve Jobs. And I said, we really, you've got some followers on Twitter and stuff. You help us promote this. It's like, I don't have that many, but I'll do what I can. And I said, well, how much are you trying to raise? He said, we're trying to raise $1,500. I said, I'll do even better. I'll bid $500 as the opening bid on each painting. So I got you. Don't worry about it. Okay, so what does this have to do with the discussion we're just having? Well, Statue of Liberty sold thousands of dollars. Einstein obviously sold for $1,000. Out of 480,000 plus members of the IEEE, on mailing list everywhere, I'm tweeting it, everything, only one person bid on the portrait of Steve Jobs.
Really?
And that was me and the opening bid. So months later, this ginormous crate box shows up at my office. And people are like, why do you have that painting? And I've had people offer me a shit ton of money for it, like an insane amount of money. And I'm like, no, that stays in my office. It stays in that closet with some other memorabilia I have. And the reason it is that is my reminder. Whenever I'm on a video conference, I have that great idea. I look over there to the left for a second. I'm thinking about it. I'm writing something. I'm like, and it is my reminder of the law of unintended consequences, right? And I think it's okay for us to go into the future fearless and hopeful, with the best intentions as long as we have some methodology for looking at the unintended consequences of what we're creating. And so I think if you look at it from an unintended consequences perspective, I think it's great. But that's not a doomsdayer perspective. That's just acknowledging that, yes, there could be these bad outcomes and we want to be aware of them and know that what we're changing over here, how's it going to affect that, and so on and so on. But that's not saying like, oh, stop for 6 months. It's going to be, it's going to kill us all. So that's really important. And that painting serves as a constant reminder in my life, literally every day in the office, of why, like just why I don't, feel that way. It's something to be aware of, not fearful of. Why would you want to live your whole life in fear of a thing you're creating? Right? It's like Frankenstein's monster, kind of like, yeah, sure, maybe. But I mean, that's fantasy novel. This is real life. This technology exists. It is already out there. There are already variants of it out there. There are hundreds of millions of people using it. It's a little different scenario. I think the should we do A or not pause or regulate it should have been like a discussion back in like Doug Lennett's days, right? 1984, Doug Lennett started building Psych. I had the pleasure of having him as a friend and mentor. He's wonderful, one of the big thinkers of our time. And that would have been a great time to think about it in the 80s or 90s or the early 2000s or the 10s.
Or literally
we've been
anytime
talking
except for
about
roughly
it
like this year.
Yeah, but it's like now that it's here, we're like, oh, wait, what about? It's like, whoa, it's definitely too late for that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's just a lot. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. There's just a lot.
But that's what's so wonderful. We get the opportunity to live through this moment in time. We get the opportunity for more voices than have ever been represented to be able to be a part of this, to be able to have these discussions, to be able to drive things in these directions. It is fucking phenomenal.
It's going to be amazing. But I'm on your side. I literally am on your side. I want to approach the future with complete positivity and just realize there will be dangers and we're going to deal with them.
That's the greatest thing about being a human being is our adaptability.
I think that is almost one of the core fundamental things of being a human being is adaptability. Last question. If there was a technology that you could blink into existence, which I realize is something that's slightly abhorrent for people like us because we definitely want to invent it and work on it, and et cetera. But
nah, I'm okay with blinking it into existence.
If you can blink it into existence, you don't need to do any follow-ups or anything like that. That has something to do with your field, something. What would that technology be? What does that look like?
So it's really simple. There's a lot of them. I got a list. Okay. And my list goes kind of in the order of the top three is I would definitely jump to a quantum superintelligence. If I just blink it into existence, I would. I think it'd be worth the risk. I think it'd work out.
Okay.
But let's not count that one.
Okay.
Okay. 2 and 3, and I can't decide on the order of 2 and 3, would be very, very simple. I would love to have commercial space travel. Not necessarily going to space, but where you pop up and the Earth is spinning and you land in Paris in 30 minutes or an hour or whatever. But I would like it to be affordable enough to where everybody could be able to see the curvature of the Earth. Because flat earthers drive me crazy, but also so that kids would see, it's like that old tale of Merlin turning King Arthur into an eagle or whatever. And he's like, there's no borders. And, I really think just putting kids on planes would be like, what? Like, I don't think we don't put enough importance on the simplest of experiences that really changes a person's outlook. So I think that kind of travel and being affordable would change everything for the world, bring us closer together, but boom. So that's one. The other one would be in a similar vein. They're both kind of travel related, which is teleportation. If I could bring anything out of all three of those right now, given my schedule and how many planes I'm on, I would much rather sleep in my own bed tonight, be in the office all day tomorrow, and right before my dinner, just teleport to San Francisco, go to the dinner, teleport home and sleep in my own bed.
Teleportation.
So given the fact that I've gone almost 300,000 miles this year, and it's April. Like, I literally have not been home. And we were talking about this when we were setting up this call. That's right now would definitely be probably my first one. Although honestly, the quantum superintelligence is kind of the cheat answer, because it's like, well, then it could just invent the teleportation or whatever else.
I like it. Will, it's been amazing having you on. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
This has been incredible. We had a great conversation. Wow, seriously, you got my brain spinning. I'll probably barely sleep tonight. Got a lot of different things to think about as we're going forward. Want to toss out your socials or books or companies?
Yeah,
or
I'm just Whurley, Whurley on Twitter, LinkedIn, everywhere. So easy to find. Email's easy to find too, but if you can't figure that out, I'm not going to tell you. And then, there's 2 books actually. So Quantum Computing for Babies, which is available on Amazon, which is the first book I did with Chris Ferry, who's an amazing author. He has a whole set of scientific books I encourage everybody to go check out. And then I'm working with my co-author Floyd Smith on the follow-up to Babies, which is Quantum Computing for Dummies with Whurley, which is for sale on Amazon now and should be shipping to people around September.
Outstanding. Thanks. That's going to be amazing. I'll read them both. For those listening and those watching, Will Hurley and I have been standing on the shoulders of giants. Thank you.